morning and welcome to another edition. This is the October edition of Reparations now. This program comes to you auspices of the Ministry of the Presidency, Department of Social Cohesion, and it aims to make Africans aware of some of the issues related to their existence here in Guyana. And it's only fitting that the state should be involved in sponsoring this kind of education to Africans and to the nation in particular, especially because it was on the 2nd of April 1810 in the county of Berbice that Africans were banned from expressing themselves as a cultural entity. In the studio with me this evening is Wazero Esther Gittins. She's the secretary of the Guyana Reparations Committee. I am Jonathan Adams, the deputy chair of the Guyana Reparations Committee. And we will continue to look at our book, The Guyana Reparations Story. This evening we will be having a competition. We'll be having a competition, which means that, yes, we'll open the lines up in the last 15 minutes of the program, in which persons will call be allowed to call in and answer a number of questions, which we will have crawling at the bottom of your television, screens. And so, without much further ado, we do a recap of chapter 1 of the Guyana Reparations story, which we began to look at last month, and then we go into chapter 2. Now, in this book, the Guyana Reparations story, there are some very interesting little quotations at the beginning of each one of the chapters. And in chapter 1, there is this very interesting quote which says, "Africa is the birthplace of man." So, if you wanted to know what is the birthplace of man on planet Earth, then you would have to go to Africa. In chapter 1, like in book 1 actually, the quotation at the beginning says, "Life is precious. All human life is precious." It says that Earth is 4.5 to 4.6 billion years old. I'll go it over again. Earth is 4.5 to 4.6 billion years old. On page 5 in book 1, it says that Lucy predates the Adam and Eve story by at least 3 million years. And so this presents a new perspective in time. Earth is 4.5 to 4.6 billion years old. Lucy predates the Adam and Eve story by at least 3 million years. And then on page 6, we see the Sand People. In this book, we see this picture of the Sand People. These people are the people whom Dr. Spencer Wells, a genetic scientist, has been able to trace the origins of all of the families, that is the ethnic families or racial families, Caucasians, the Mongoloids, the Caucasoids, and the Africoids, trace them back to this one particular family, the Sand People. And you'll see a picture of the Sand People on page 6 in the Guyana Reparations story. Now, if you want to know how you can get the Guyana reparations story, one of the ways in which you can lay your hand on the Guyana reparations story is through the competition which we are going to be running in the last 15 minutes. And I asked Sister Esther to, Wozero Esther, to bring you up to date with how we are going to be doing that computation.
Yes, thank you, Brother Jonathan. It's a pleasure being here once again on the October edition or episode of the Guyana Reparation Story. Well, the competition during this, our live television program, we'll be having 10 questions at least crawling at the bottom of your screen. And if you have been following us, because it's for some time now we've been expounding on the Guyana Reparation story during our monthly programs, and we showed images and had a full discussion on our September episode. And Brother Jonathan just gave you a brief recap, and I'm sure he has some more details for you. So if you've been staying with us and you've been focusing and you've been taking notes as we've asked you to do since Sister Penda was here with the Do You Know, you should be in a very good position to answer some of the questions from the Guyana Reparation story. Now, once you're successful in answering a question correctly, we'll ask you to come down to the Museum of African Heritage in Berrima Avenue, Bel Air, on Thursday at 5:30, where you will be given a prize, which includes a copy of the Guyana Reparation story. So that's how we intend to move forward with
But
our
a
quiz.
question arises. If
Yes.
somebody calls in from Linden, or because this program goes around the country, or
Yes.
from Berbice, how are they going to get their copy of the book?
Well, we do have representatives in those areas in Linden. You yourself is from Linden. I am from Linden too. And we have Brother Isaac Welcome, who is our Barbies representative. We also have Brother Royston Peters, who is our Essequibo representative, because we have viewers all the way in Essequibo. I'm quite sure they're looking at this program right now. So either you come down to the Guyana Reparations Committee meeting every Thursday at the Museum of African Heritage. Of course, we're always happy to have new visitors, new members come to our weekly meetings. And you could indicate to us if it would be a difficulty, and we can arrange to have you receive your copy of Guyana Reparations.
I had a very interesting experience. I think it was last night or night before the last. I jumped into a taxi to go home, and I heard coming from behind me, "You look like the man that been doing the program where y'all been talking about them people who was the first." And he said, the woman that y'all show, she looked like a real African. And that face that he was talking about was Lucia. And he said a very interesting thing. He said, the program is it's a very good program. He was talking about reparations now, because he was talking about the informative nature of the program. But he was zeroed in on Lucia. He was
Okay.
zeroed in on Lucia. And he said that, he said to me, she looked like a real African, and he said, keep it up. Now, Lucia, this particular image that has stuck in the brother's head, is the image of the oldest fossilized bones to be found in the Guyana Shield. And Sister Esther has got the story. She talks the story better than I do. So I'll ask Esther to talk the Lucia story.
The Lucia story. Oh,
Yes.
well, Lucia, of course, in the beginning there was no Venezuela, Guyana, Suriname, Brazil. It was just one Guyana shield. And so archaeologists are found um, artifacts dating as far back as 200 years old, African artifacts. But
12,000. 12,000 actually.
well, if you listen to me carefully, you'll hear me say that they found artifacts as old as 200 years ago. But the oldest fossil they found in this region, South America, is 12,000 years old. That's the oldest fossil they found, but they have found African artifacts dating 200 years old. Now they found that fossil, the oldest fossil in South America, which is 12,000 years old since 1975, but she was recently unearthed at this, buried in the bottom of the attic of this museum, of a museum in Menesgeras. And unfortunately, that museum burnt a few months back, and all those artifacts, including the first fossils, which is 12,000 years old, was burnt in that fire.
Yes, and then and then there is this on page 6. Well, the story of Lucia, you will find that on page 9 in book 1. And so, it's very important. You have to get this book to get this new education that is going to sweep the world and Guyana and South America soon. But then on page 10, there is this very interesting face of the Olmec heads, of an Olmec head. And these Olmec heads are to be found in, yes, these Olmec heads are to be found in the country Mexico. Now, if you look at this head very carefully, you're going to see that this is not the accustomed phenotypical features that we tend to associate with Southern America, North America, etc. This is distinctly an African head. This is called the Olmec head. Brother Dr. Ivan van Sertima, in his book They Came Before Columbus, dealt at length and showed various pictures from various angles about these heads. So again, we see evidence of a pre-enslavement presence, or at least extra enslavement presence of Africans in South America, in Mexico, and in Brazil. And then on the last page, on page 12, we have a comparison of the Olmec heads and Lucia. And so this provides, Sister Esther, very interesting, food for thought, and also for the agitation of the young minds of the country.
True.
To spur their minds towards probably trying to find out, ask the questions, why is it we never knew about this? We've been going to school all the time and nobody has ever told us that, they find fossils of African people here outside of slavery, and they find big stone heads carved. These things weigh tons in Mexico, and nobody has told us. What's your comments before we go on to book 2?
Well, I would start with the Guyana scene. In 1803, anything African was banned. You could be killed or you could be imprisoned for propagating anything African. So it's no wonder the story is being told, which is his story being told from a Eurocentric point of view. And their aim is to always keep the African mind disoriented and uneducated in relation to their history and their or ancestry, I should say, and knowledge of their past.
This is a very, I'm looking at this page immediately after page 12, which makes it even more important for this book to be acquired. It says Africans were here first in the Guyana Shield.
Yes.
I'll read a little bit of it for you. The earliest people in the Americas were people of Negritic African race who entered the Americas probably as early as 100,000 years ago by way of the Bering Strait, and about 30,000 years ago in a worldwide maritime undertaking that included journeys from the then wet and lake-filled Sahara towards the Indian Ocean and the Pacific, and from West Africa across the Atlantic Ocean towards the Americas. According to the Gladwin thesis, and this is interesting, the Gladwin thesis, this ancient journey occurred particularly about 75,000 years ago and included black pygmies, black negritic peoples, and black astroloids similar to the aboriginal black people of Australia and parts of Asia, including India. Recent discoveries in the field of linguistics and other methods have shown without a doubt that the ancient Olmecs of Mexico, known as the Zai people, came originally from West Africa and were of the Mende African ethnic stock. According to Clyde A. Winters and other writers, the Mende script was discovered on some of the ancient Olmec monuments of Mexico and was found to be identical to the very script used by the Mende people of Western Africa. So there is the Mende script being found in Mexico as well as in West Africa. This means that there definitely was travel between Africa and Southern America by African people predating and outside of the period of enslavement.
Of course, it was the Africans who brought Columbus and others to these parts of the world. And in fact, it's quite recently reading has shown that actually they brought the Moors, St. Maurice the Moor brought Columbus through, and I think if I'm right, it was 13 ships through the Atlantic, which was the roughest entrance to this part of the world. So they end up losing quite a few ships through the rough passage of the Atlantic Ocean. So not only did they didn't want to bring them, they tried their best to bring them through the roughest channel to this part of the world.
And then book 2, Africa before chattel slavery.
Yes.
Book 1 is In the Beginning, but book 2, Africa before chattel slavery,
Yes.
has a very interesting quotation as a prologue. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery.
Yes.
None but ourselves can free our minds, by Brother Marcus Garvey.
Yes.
Marcus Garvey is a must read for all young Africans,
True.
for everybody. But emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. These words have been immortalized by another Jamaican, Bob Marley, in his song. But there, at the beginning, I'd read this little quotation at the beginning of chapter 2, book 2. Africa is the birthplace of man. And I'm repeating it. Africa is the birthplace of man.
Yes.
There is a very interesting, if I may divert slightly from this book, there is a very interesting bit of information which is to be found in one of the manuals which is being used here in Guyana to prepare teachers. And that manual That bit of information is the evidence, or let us say the submissions, of the Reverend John Sterling, who was an advisor to the British Parliament, who said, there are now approximately 770 Africans who have been freed by the Emancipation Act. I'm paraphrasing. Who have been made free by the Emancipation Act. These people are rapidly on a move to becoming free. This represents a threat to the empire. Something has got to be done, and it has got to be done now. The Emancipation Act having given them their freedom, it is up to us now to use education to take control of their minds.
True.
And so when Brother Marcus Garvey says, emancipate yourselves from mental slavery, none but ourselves could free our minds, it's rooted in historical fact and not in ethnocentric fancy.
True. Well, what I would like to say, we have to call on our technician to show the images, because we have a few of the images to put up so our viewers could not only hear, but they could see some of the images that we're going to be discussing.
Oh yes, so this is excellent.
Yes.
So we've got book 2, the cover for book 2, Africa Before Slavery, and so now these bones that you are seeing here, the Lebombo and the Ishango bones, these bones are evidence that long before we even think of mathematics as an activity, that Africans were involved in recording numerical data to be used for recording purposes and for also measuring purposes.
True. Absolutely.
All right, so those are the Lebombo and the Ishango bones, which shows that the beginning of mathematics are in Africa. I read a little piece. The Ishango bones found on the borders of Uganda and Zaire on the shores of Lake Edward, a source of the Nile, is the second oldest mathematical project in the world. Many say the Ishango bone is the oldest table of prime numbers. Marshak, a researcher, concluded on the basis of his microscope that the Ishango bone represented a 6-month lunar calendar, prime numbers, and a menstrual calendar. So it was more than just the recording of numerical values. Now, what do you have to say, Sister Esther, about a people who would take a bone, a baboon bone, and put all these things on it? A 6-month lunar calendar, prime numbers, and a menstrual calendar.
Well, it's obvious they knew how to preserve their work of art, because that is definitely a work of art. And they probably knew that the paper or whatever recording material would disintegrate, and they probably knew too the durability of the baboon bones for them too, which is highly scientific, not only mathematical.
And just before we go back into the book, just to remind the audience that, you're going to see some questions come crawling across the bottom of your television screen. Those questions, if you answer them correctly, you will be able to get a copy of this book so that you can sit down and study it for yourself and begin to free yourself of the mental enslavement that we have suffered. If we go to this page shows a very interesting fact. Now, this brother that you're watching at here, the image of this brother, Imhotep. Imhotep is, Sister Esther, you could.
Oh. Well, Imhotep is the father of medicine. He is the famous.
But I thought you said it was Hippocrates.
No, it could never be Hippocrates. Long before he was ever, Imhotep was. If Hippocrates actually learned all he knows from Egypt, in the one of the world's greatest museum, which was even this brother Imhotep has helped to create.
And
Not only was he the father of medicine, he was also an archaeologist, he was a scientist, he was a doctor of medicine, he was.
He was a prime minister also too. So this was a multi-talented,
Yes.
multi-talented genius who diagnosed and treated over 200 diseases.
Yes.
Today, the medical profession, we have specialists who deal with bone and eye. This brother
Dealt with everything. And he's one of the world's greatest architects too, because some of his creations, the greatest scientists of the world today cannot even explain.
Doesn't this make you proud to be an African?
Of course, it makes me proud to be an African.
I mean, doesn't it give us there's a legacy? Oh shucks, I look down and I see I ain't got an African shirt, but you know, I just wear me African shirt because
Yes.
I claiming a legacy.
Yes, of course.
Is this not a legacy to want to claim,
Of
to
course
be
it
among,
is.
to be known, to be one of those persons who diagnosed, who comes from a people where one of us diagnosed and treated over 200 diseases?
Most certainly. And you know, he also coined the phrase, let your food be your medicine, and your medicine be your food.
And then there is the step pyramid of Saqqara. And I want to read something about this particular building. Now, if you look on your television screens, you're going to see two at the top. You're going to see two buildings. You're going to see a head, and you're going to see over to that is going to be, you're going to see a step thing like, it might be on the left of your screen, but that step thing is a step pyramid of Saqqara. Now that particular building is built of approximately 2.3 million blocks of stone, which were cut, transported, and assembled to create this 5,575,000 ton structure, which is widely seen as a masterpiece of technical skill and engineering ability long before we had these fancy
Skyscrapers.
theodolites and them kind of. These were among the first skyscrapers. And if you look over on the other side where the Sphinx, Horem Hapet. The Europeans call it the Sphinx, but the Egyptians called it Horem Hapet.
Okay.
You know, they went and they renamed everything.
Yes.
But behind Horem Hapet is is one of the great pyramids on the Giza plateau. Now that is another fascinating story.
Yes.
These pyramids are aligned to the three stars in Orion's belt.
True.
But then if we go down, because we're gonna come back to this in a little later in this same book. But if we look down at the bottom of that, just let's go back to the previous picture, please. The one with yes, that same one. This brother down at the bottom here is an absolutely fascinating role model for all 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 12 years old, all black people. all Africans in Guyana. Sister Esther, I give you the opportunity to introduce this brother.
Well, I will have to throw that back to you because I don't know. I myself have to learn about Tutankhamun. What is his name? What is his name?
King Tutankhamun.
Ooh.
Tutankhamun. Tutankhamun.
Tutankhamun.
This is if you watch it, this image that you're watching at here is not King Tut's face. But what amazes me is the almost flesh-like qualities that this burial mask portrays. This is his burial mask.
I know it is.
King Tut's almost human-like.
True.
What you're watching at there is solid gold.
True.
And sapphire is the blue thing. But look at how they constructed his beard. They plait the gold or carved it in plaiting. The craftsmanship that is involved here is astonishing.
True.
But this is the homage paid to a 9-year-old king who became pharaoh in Egypt when he was 9 years old. I think he reigned for about 4 years and died at the age of 13.
Yes.
But this particular mask has been coveted by the Europeans. And so there's this whole movement throughout Europe now where the people from Benin and a number of the African countries are saying to Europe here, give it back, we think that you're thief.
Of course.
Imagine, it's very interesting, Egypt. Egypt is getting some of her artifacts back on permanent loan.
Permanent loan. That's a big joke.
Yes, and so that was King Tut, King Tutankhamun. And so there are a couple of other pictures that we would like to look at. Now this one is fascinating. You know, long time when people want to tell you, say, you're stupid, they used to tell you, like, you know, you come from Timbuktu. But little did we understand as young people growing up when we were telling people, hey, like, you come from Timbuktu. Now, what we were engaging in was the perpetuation of self-hatred amongst ourselves. True. For long before the Europeans and the propagation, you know, the false propagation and True. Giving our credits to other people. For long before the Europeans had anything like a university, these African people in Timbuktu had, for instance, the Quranic Sankore University. And you're going to find that on page 7.
First university, Sankore.
And up to now, they still got books from that university. The Arabs hustling to destroy them now. Because they don't want people to understand that, you know, these people that we've been besmirching all the time, that we've been cussing and saying that they never gave no contribution to nothing, that we actually started all kinds of education, the first university. But down at the bottom, coming down to the bottom, King Mansa Musa. In fact, Mansa means king in the language of the Mali people. Mansa means king. Mansa Musa, King Musa, the richest man ever on the planet Earth. Don't bother with Bill Gates and these now come petty millionaires. If you want to understand wealth, study King Mansa Musa from that same country of Mali in Africa. Mali itself is deserving of study because it's a confluence of African and Arabic cultures. And there's a story which is told about this brother that when he was going to his Mecca, I think this was him on his journey to Mecca, when he passed through Egypt on his way through down to Mecca, he gave away so many gifts of gold that he plunged the economy of that part of the region of the world into depression, and still had plenty more to go back home and maintain his empire. These people, the Moors who came out from that area of northern Africa, were the people, uh, the, the Moors who came out of North Africa, were the people who civilized Europe.
True. True.
Well, I give you the opportunity.
Oh. Well, some of the greatest fashion who we would think today are European fashion is actually fashion of the Moors. All those great castles and palaces that we think that none were built by Europeans, they're all built by Africans. And I sometimes look at these great replicas of our creativity in architectural skills as some small amount of consolation for finding myself here in the Caribbean, seeing as we the Africans built all the great civilizations. It's no wonder we had to come and build up this part.
You know what is interesting is that it says here, and we read page 9 in book 2, scientific progress in astronomy, chemistry, physics, mathematics, geography, and philosophy flourished in Moorish Spain.
Yes.
That is Spain when it was ruled by these North Africans.
True.
Basil Davidson, one of the most noted historians, recognized and declared that there were no lands at that time in the 8th century more admired by its neighbors or more comfortable to live in than a rich African civilization which took shape in Spain. Yes, and so that's on page 9, where when once you lay your hand on the book, you can read a little more on it. And then on page 11, we have here evidence that the mining of minerals is one of the things that took place in Africa pre-enslavement according to Brother Ivan van Sertima, at a highly advanced, that the mining and the production of steel, mining of iron and the production of steel in Africa pre-enslavement was among the best that one could have found. In fact, he says that there was a particular kind of steel that was produced in Africa, wool steel, which was traded throughout India and throughout Asia. Wool steel, which was produced in Africa at a far more efficient rate than anywhere else than steel was being produced anywhere else in the world. Then there was,
They had to be into serious mining, because we just discussed King Tut's burial mass. Look, you had to be into serious mining to be able to afford that amount of gold and precious stones just for a burial mass.
Metallurgy. And then there was transoceanic travel and navigation. In fact, it's very interesting. When the Africans came out of enslavement here in Guyana, they moved into the gold fields.
Of course, they were accustomed to mining, because then they don't want to talk about it too, but we are the ones who first started gold mining, and they would call it pork knocking, but we were the first pork knockers in Guyana.
I ain't gonna call it pork knocking. I can say gold mining.
Gold mining.
Yes.
Yes, mining. But that's one of the things that is being lost too, because it was pork knocking is one of the old descriptions.
And then there's the transoceanic travel and navigation. Well, the evidence we discussed before.
Yes.
In fact, Columbus, in his journal, said that as he was sailing coming down, he saw Africans sailing going in the opposite direction.
But that's just part of the story, because he was at the top of the ship, and St. Maurice de Moor was the one in the whole of the boat navigating with the compass. It is St. Maurice de Moor who brought Columbus here.
You know what is interesting is that we should ask ourselves the question, where these Portuguese and Spanish people get their maps of the world from? And start checking that one out. There's certainly, because don't forget, at that point in time, they were still of the opinion that the world was flat.
True.
And that if you go too far, you would drop off the world. So where they get these maps from that show these other continents, that gave them the courage to believe that they could sail and go down and find these other things and not drop off. Who been drawing these maps? And then law and religion, astronomy, philosophy. Now here's where I'd like to read one particular paragraph on the astronomy to show the fascinating nature of this legacy that I claim personally as an African, and I'm proud to claim. The Dogon people of Mali, this is a particular set of people in Mali. So if we go back to Mali, we got Mansa Musa, we got the Sankore University, but also too, there's a particular set of people who live in Mali. They're called the Dogon people. These are fascinating people. These are people who can sit down on a stone and tell you, look, you see that star there? You can look and you can see no star. But they have got such keen eyesight that they can tell you that there's this particular star. In fact, the star which the Europeans call Sirius, they call it Sigipolo. They call it Sigipolo. They plotted the orbit of Sigipolo without any telescopes and that kind of thing. And they plotted and are so familiar with it that they can draw the orbit of Sigipolo, Sirius, in the sun with their hands. So familiar are they with it. The Dogon people of Mali amassed a wealth of detailed astronomical knowledge. They knew of Saturn's rings, Jupiter's moons, and the spiral structure of the Milky Way and the orbit of the star Sirius, which is what they call Sigipolo. This is a very interesting bit, additional bit of information to that. I think even up to now, there is still a debate as to whether the solar system is 12 planets or 9.
Well, they recently announced, I think it's about 3 years now, that one planet is no more.
Well, I don't know, but there is this debate. But the Dogons have been saying to them all the time, listen, let me tell you, it is neither 9 or 12, but 13.
Okay.
The Dogons have been saying to them that our solar system is neither 9 nor 12, but
it's 13.
13 planets. And so with that little introduction to books 1 and 2 of the Guyana Reparation story, it's time for us to, Sister Esther, make the announcement.
The questions?
Yes.
Well, we can now fairly say that the lines are open. We'll take our calls and see who is our lucky winners who will be our new visitors to the Museum of African Heritage on Thursday, or see who we have to orchestrate for them to get their books wherever they are if they can't come to the museum. But of course, you know, you're always welcome at the Museum of African Heritage every Thursday, 5:30, where the Guyana Reparations Committee has its weekly meetings. I think we're on our 47th or 48th meeting for the year. And
45th.
the
Next week is going to be the
45th.
46th.
45th. All right.
But whilst we waiting, yes.
I needed to say that you said
ahead.
we were actually a brief introduction. This is actually a recap on the first book, because our last episode, which was in September, we did expound and show the images too of the first book of Guyana Reparation story. So we did a recap and an introduction to book 2. This
Recap and introduction, and so the questions, Sister Esther, the questions.
Well, the questions we had asked our technician to run them at
So
the
it
bottom of our
seems
screen during the program. We don't usually see the crawls in studio, but I'm told the technician.
okay.
is
Good
shaking her head.
evening. You're on to reparations now.
Good evening.
Yes. Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes. Good evening. Is there a question you'd like to answer?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which one of the questions you'd like to answer? Could you identify the question, give the answer, and then if you're correct, give your name?
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
The medicine.
Could you please
The
turn
part of
down
the medicine.
your television?
The television?
Yeah, please turn it down for us.
Okay, I can move from it.
Yes.
Excellent. Oh, so that's why you wasn't here. Yes.
You could go ahead and answer the question of your choice.
That's the question of medicine. Yes. Who's the father of the medicine?
Yes.
Yes.
God?
God. No. Sorry.
Incorrect. Incorrect. We'll give you another shot at it. Come on.
The doctor?
That's
What's the doctor's
incorrect.
name? What's the doctor's name? There is a particular African doctor.
African doctor?
He was a multi-genius. Yes.
The queen of the king of Africa.
And we just discussed it. So if you were listening, you would have heard us. We spent some time on him.
I hear you. I hear you.
No, but look,
Alright, we got to give another call a chance.
the fact that you
Okay.
came through, we're inviting you to Barima Avenue on Thursday, where you can learn, get this thing in your head for sure and forever. Thank you very much for coming through, caller.
All right. Okay.
Okay. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening.
What do we do?
Okay. So, well, once we wait on the, it's very
Is this thing
interesting.
working good? Alright.
Yes, it's working. Good evening. You're on to reparations now.
So, good evening. I'd like to answer the question, who's the father of medicine? It's supposed to be Imhotep.
Yes.
Imhotep. Excellent.
You're correct. And what's your name, may I ask?
My name is Mr. Smart.
What Smart?
Quincy Smart.
Smart.
Quincy Smart.
Yeah.
Quincy
Smart.
Smart.
M-A-R-T-T.
Yes, Quincy. So you'll come down to Barima Avenue next Thursday at 5:30. Walk with your identification and collect your copy of the Guyana Reparation story and start a whole new educational experience for yourself. Thank you very much.
All right, cheers, Jonathan.
Thank you very much, man.
Yes, and I would like to say we've just covered 2 books. The Guyana Reparation story is divided into 4 parts, and we still have two more segments to go.
Yes. Good afternoon. Good evening, sorry. You're on to reparations now.
Hi, good evening.
Yes, good
I'd like
evening.
to answer the question with the oldest skeleton found on Earth.
Yes.
it 12,000 years ago?
12,000 years ago? No, you got it wrong. Try again. All right, thank you very much. And so, the 12,000 years, the 12,000 year skeleton is the one found on the Guyana Shield. You're on to reparations now. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, good evening. Which
Reparation?
Yes,
which-
it is.
Yes, which one of the questions you'd like to answer?
Who is the richest man?
Yes, let's hear. Who is the richest man ever on planet Earth?
King Masamusa?
Mansa Musa, excellent. And where was Mansa Musa from?
From Mali.
From Mali. What's your name?
Janet Armstein?
What's your name, please?
Janet Armstein.
Something. Shanet? What, Hermanstein?
Janet Armstein.
Shawnette Hermanstein. Shawnette, thank you very much. You're a second winner, and you are our fourth invitee to come down to Barima Avenue on Thursday at 5:30 p.m. That's going to be our 46th meeting for the year, where you will be able to get your copy of the Guyana Reparations story. Thank you very much, Shawnette. Yes, and so it's at least persons are listening. You're on to reparations now. Okay, here, Mr. Roberts, could you kindly move away from your television? Call. Just advising you that once you make the call, move away from your television or turn the volume of your television sets down. Good evening, you're on to reparations now.
Yes, good evening to you both, Esther and Jonathan.
Good
Excellent.
evening.
Well, most of the questions have been answered. Let me try with the oldest.
No, only two questions have been answered, sis.
Two answered already. Let me try the one that's on the screen now. Lucia, the name of the oldest skeleton found on Earth.
No, it's not.
Lucia, I can't.
Lucia isn't the oldest skeleton. That's incorrect.
We give you another chance.
Well, you know, the brain is not as young as yours. But I could have answered those before. I remember that clearly.
All right. The oldest skeleton found on Earth is who? Lucy or Lucia?
Lucia.
No.
Incorrect. Incorrect.
Thank you very much for coming through. Okay. So it seems as though this is a stump, this question. Good evening, you're on to reparations now.
Good evening.
Yes, good evening, you're on to reparations now. Is this a question you'd like to answer, sir?
Yeah, 3 countries on the Guyana Shield. One is Suriname,
Yes.
Excellent.
Brazil,
Yes.
and Venezuela.
Yes. Can we ask for your name, please?
Yeah, my name is Lennox Merchant.
Lennox
Lennox Merchant.
Could you
Merchant.
please?
Familiar known as Muslim.
Okay.
AKA Muslim. All right, Muslim, come down with your ID card to Barima Avenue, 5:30 on Thursday. The African Heritage Museum. We say Barima Avenue, but we not tell them the African Heritage Museum at 5:30 on Thursday, where you'll be able to collect your copy of the Guyana Reparations story. The question on the oldest skeleton on Earth seems to be, people seem to be mixed up between the oldest skeleton on Earth and the oldest skeleton found in the Guyana Shield.
Yes.
Good evening, you're on to reparations now.
Hi, good evening. The
Question with the oldest skeleton found on Earth is Lucy.
Lucy,
Yeah.
excellent. Where was this particular skeleton found?
I can't remember.
You can remember in how many years it is carbon dated to have, how old is it carbon dated to be?
So.
Excellent. Well, here what you can do, you can come down on Thursday to the sister.
That isn't directly correct because the oldest skeleton is 3.1 million years old. The 12,000 skeleton is the oldest skeleton found in the Guyana Shield. So Lucy, who was found in Ethiopia, is 3.1 million years old. That's the oldest skeleton. But you are welcome to come down to the Museum of African Heritage in Berrima Avenue on Thursday at 5:30, where you will be given a copy of the Guyana Reparations story.
So can we get your name?
I'm Patricia Tyndall.
Tyndall?
Yeah, T-Y-N.
Patricia Tyndall.
T-A-L-L.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. I think, yes, thank you very much, Patricia. It's about time. The very interesting program as another interesting program has come to an end. This is the last caller we'll be able to take. Is there a question that you'd like to answer, sir? Or madam? Move away from your television set, please. Or tone the volume down.
The one with the Guyana shield?
No, that one is gone already.
Where's one you got? Because I can't remember none except them that was answered.
All right, where is Egypt?
In North Africa.
In North Africa, excellent. Can we get your name, sir?
Ian Cato.
Ian Cato.
Yeah.
Yes. And on that note, we must say it has been an excellent evening.
Before you hang up, let us ask Ian, Mr. Cato, to come down to the Museum of African Heritage, Berrima Avenue on Thursday, 5:30, for your copy of the Guyana Reparations story. Thank you.
And that invitation goes out to the public in general. Until we meet on Thursday, and until we meet on November, the last Sunday, no, the fourth Sunday in November, we go out of this program saying it's time for reparations
Reparations now.